Good morning. I'm Eric Longo, Executive Director of MCN. Welcome to Your Stuff and How to Swing It. As Chair, I'd like to introduce our panel of speakers this morning. Anne Young, who is Manager of Rights and Reproductions at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. Anne has been with the IMA since 2010. She's responsible for processing all external requests for the use of IMA-created visual content, obtaining permissions for IMA uses of images, and administering the museum's on-site photography policy. She also initiates and manages all licensing agreements with artists and or rights holders for works in the IMA collection. Young was formerly the photographic archivist at the Kingsley Institute of Indiana at Indiana University and has worked for the Art Gallery of Ontario and George Eastman House. She received an MA in Photographic Preservation and Collections Management from Ryerson University and a BA in Art History and Studio Art from Indiana University. John French, hi John, how are you? He's the Director of Visual Resources at Yale University Art Gallery. He oversees workflow, design, color management, and long-term archiving of images and image data at the Yale University Art Gallery. He supervises the creation, quality control, asset management, distribution of and rights related to images of works of art for publication, study, documentation, educational programs, promotion, and other uses. And he's worked at the Denver Art Museum, and so I'm like collapsing these bios a little bit. Deborah Wythe, hi there, how are you? Is the head of digital collections and services at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. I don't need to say where that is. She's been with the Brooklyn Museum since 1986, where her first role was serving as museum archivist. Digitization efforts in the archives led her to initiate a cross-departmental project to research and evaluate DAM software. In 2005, she was charged with designing and heading a new department, Digital Collections and Services, which is now responsible for all imaging activities museum-wide, including the photo studio, the scan lab, digital asset management, copyright clearance, outside image acquisition, and rights and reproductions. And I think that's important. She said, in a commitment to transparency and access, the Brooklyn Museum provides rights information on its website for all objects in its collection. Lourdes Santamaria-Wheeler is the exhibits coordinator at the University of Florida George Smathers Libraries. This role includes planning, directing, and organizing an active exhibition program designed to share, interpret, and promote the library's collections. Currently, she's the co-PI on preserving a legacy, celebrating a centennial, leveraging an extraordinary human achievement, a 3-year IMLS grant to integrate the collection and community for the former Panama Canal Museum, developing a national model of collaboration in the process. And Gray Bowman is the lead software architect at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. As you know, this session has been recorded for audio, so at the end of the session, if you have any questions, make sure you come to the microphone in the middle of the room and you speak clearly so that we can capture your questions. And also this year, in an effort to get your feedback for all the sessions, we've put those little yellow survey papers or cards on your seat. It takes less than 1 minute, and it would really help us if you actually fill them out and leave them at the back of the session. On that note, let's go.
Hello, I'm Gray Bowman, lead software architect at the IMA Lab. I'm co-presenting today with Rita Troyer, our senior digital graphic designer. I'm going to be covering the development and implementation of our new collection pages, and then she'll walk us through the design and we'll do a brief demo. So the title of this is Data DAGWOOD, and the concept behind this is, if you know of a DAGWOOD sandwich, is a multi-layered sandwich that comprises different meats and cheeses and breads. And this is kind of the representation of this idea of a middleware layer or a database that we have in the museum that takes information from different data silos, be it collection management or the digital asset management system or any other bits and pieces of information we have about the collection, and brings it together into one one data layer that we can then use to build tools off of. And we've had this already at the IMA before. We called it Mercury. We built it about 5 years ago, and it was based on Java, and it's worked really well for us for the past 4 or 5 years. It pulls in data from both our collection management system, which is EMU, related media, including maybe YouTube videos or different pieces of media that are associated with an object. Media bin, which was our previous digital asset management system. And we would use that to power the collection pages that you see on imamuseum.org today. We've had a few issues with it in that the way Mercury works, it tries to maintain a state of all this information that's out there currently. And we've had a little bit of problems with it in the sense that if data is misentered in certain places in these other data silos, it can make the whole thing kind of fall down pretty quickly, and requires a lot of hands-on work to ensure that the synchronization processes stay consistent. So we wanted to kind of redo this middle layer, reinvent it, and also we have more data now that we want to pull in. We have tags from the Steve tagging project. We have, like I said, we've converted our digital asset management system over to Piction, so we have that data to consume. And we've got other things like extended text, like long form text that we have for our objects. And we wanted to do new types of things, like caller detection is kind of hot right now, so we kind of wanted to play with that. And other fun things that we couldn't really do with the old Mercury data layer. So we could have just, try to adapt Mercury to this new stuff, but we kind of want to fix some of the problems that we've been observing with it in the past few years. We've been using, I'm going to touch on this briefly because it really this does not matter. We are using Django and Postgres because we have familiarity with it and because it provides like an object relational model or a way of accessing data that's very easy for development. So we've been using that, but this is not really key to this whole thing because you could replace these components with anything else and it would work just as well. This is just what we like to use. Here we have the collection page as it's on our Drupal-based website now. Drupal is a great product, but it does have some downsides when you have a website that's as large and complex as ours. In this example collection page, all this data is being dynamically generated from a database every time that this page is hit. And there are a lot of things that you can do to implement caching for Drupal. But the thing about caching is it only works if you're not logged in. There are exceptions to what you can and can't cache based on the context of the request. So you're spending a lot of resources to maintain this site. You have to have a nice server that can handle a lot of requests, and we have problems with that as well. Like whenever we get mentioned somewhere, if the traffic is too heavy, it really takes a toll on our server, and it's very observable. So we kind of wanted to get away from that too. Thinking how can we optimize this so that we're not spending a lot of server resources generating the same content over and over. This is a typical Drupal page, and there's not like a lot of data on here that require a lot of computation. But the fact that the whole site manages everything we do means that there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that might not necessarily relate to this page. A typical Drupal page like this can be over 100 database queries, which is quite a bit, even for like a CMS. So we wanted to use this opportunity to kind of enhance the mechanisms behind the collection pages. That said, there's a lot of talk, there's like a resurgence of what's called a static web page. And this is kind of an example of what was old is new again. We started off on the web by creating mostly all content in static web pages. And we've gotten away from that as we've built in more robust systems like Drupal to handle more dynamic needs. But we wanted to try to get back to this. The idea behind the static web page is instead of doing these 100 DB queries and generating all this content and doing these calculations every time someone wants to see the content because it might have been updated at some point, instead we're just going to front load all that computation and say we're going to generate this page once because as a collection page there's not a lot of data that needs to be changed. It probably doesn't get changed every day. It probably doesn't get changed every month. So we just need to be able to know when it's changed and regenerate that. Since we're not doing this in like a dynamic sense, there are certain things that you have to work around. Like on the Drupal page, it knows if you're logged in. A static page doesn't have that dynamic nature. It can't ask the server about things like that. So you have to put all that interactivity on the client side through JavaScript. But that's okay, because best practices, we always talk about how we should do things now in like a service-oriented nature. And the idea of letting the client do that interactivity, is right there where you want to be. It's right there consuming services from your website, but not necessarily having to do that right at the front, generating all that stuff dynamically. So the downside of the static web page is that since you're generating it once and it's sitting out there, you have to create these tools in order to allow you to know when content's been updated and regenerate all this content. Say, like, if an object has been updated, we need to push out new static content for that object. And we've had a little bit of experience with this before. We did our imalab.us website using a static generator tool called assemble.io, and all the content's written in Markdown. So we write a Markdown file, and we run a script, and it rebuilds the whole website. And so, the website is not something we update very frequently. So anytime we do update it, we have tools in place that when any content is added, it just regenerates the site, and it's easy to serve. There's no database being hit. You can have like the most basic of servers and complete this and have it served. And since it's just static content, if it's on CNN, it doesn't matter, because it's so easy for computers to serve this kind of content that there's no really concern for how many requests can I handle. So we also wanted to simplify the sync methodology, and I talked about that a little bit earlier about how Mercury was prone to breakage. And the reason for that was because it was trying to maintain that state of the collection. This time around, we said, our data layer doesn't really need to maintain that state. So anytime anything is updated, we can just kind of blow away all data related to it and just kind of rebuild that data inside the middle layer. So here are the tools that we had to build to complete this. We're using Django as basically an ORM and a template engine. And so it's pulling this stuff from the database and creating these pages in a series of steps. And the first thing we do is we pull in all the new metadata from EMU. The first time, of course, we have to pull in all the data, but after that we have a method of asking EMU what's been updated in the last couple days, and we can get that information and just rebuild that. So we do the entire metadata around the collection, pull that into the middleware, and that takes about an hour for the initial run and about 5 minutes. After that, we rebuild all the object images. And what this means is we create derivatives for the images that we have for this object in Piction. And we have a full-size image, a couple of other derivatives like a thumbnail, and then we also tile all the images. So we take the full-size original and create tiles for image zooming. And we'll show that off in a little bit later. Then we do color detection. The rebuilding the object images from the DAM is by far the largest time sink that we have in this process. Currently, it's taken about 2.5 days to do the initial run, but it only takes about 30 minutes for a typical update cycle. We do color detection, and that's a very fast process. We rebuild the Elasticsearch index, which is how we're powering the search functionalities through Elasticsearch. It's a Lucene-based project that allows you to do fuzzy searching and matches like that. We generate a sitemap so that the whole site is indexable and easily crawlable, and that does not take very long. In fact, we don't even have an update cycle for that because it just doesn't take very long. So we just rebuild it from scratch every time. We rebuild all the static assets for the research interface, the results pages, and all the supporting JavaScript that we need to do all this client-side interactivity. So we're running all this on a really old server. It's like the leftover server at the IMA. It's a 4-core Xeon. I'm not even sure if they make servers with 4 cores anymore. But these times I'm listed are on this old machine. So if we were to actually put this software on a machine that was more modern, I'm sure we could cut these all down. Like the object images would probably only take maybe half a day, 4 hours. So there's the potential to make this process a lot faster than what I'm showing here. So I'm going to let Rita walk us through the design and speak to that, and then we'll do a short demo of the pages.
Awesome. All right, well, hopefully most of you have had a chance to kind of look around, but you can find this all at collection.imamuseum.org, and you can actually pull this up on your phone now. It's all responsive if you're interested in taking a look. So this is an example of the search landing page. Our thought here was just to bring a greater emphasis to the images that you're going to begin to see within the site, and then do a little attribution in the small corner over here. So the design process began with looking at the data of our current collection site right now. So from September 2013 to October 2014, mobile and tablet users to imamuseum.org have increased to 40% of our overall website traffic. Within the collection section itself, visitors view more pages, approximately 4 pages per session, and stay 1 minute longer than on pages throughout the rest of the site. Currently, there's about a 4-minute average visit within the collection section of our site. Within that section, users visit more than one artwork 45% of the time and are returning to search and browse. Overall, users are, when they come to the visit section, they're staying in that section, and if they do happen to leave, they're going to visit, which I thought was really interesting. After looking at and analyzing the data, I began realizing we need to have a mobile-first design approach for this. So we wanted the design of the pages to be more clean and just a general better user experience overall. And let's see, I would say that we also wanted to increase exploration and discoverability of objects, because since people are already staying within the collection section, we should make it easier for them to just find other objects and have a better explore, discover approach. So I'll just begin by kind of breaking down some of the changes that you'll see. We've added search in the navigation now. We've also minimized the navigation across the top. So once you're in the collection section, it's just a little hamburger icon now to see the menu, where in the rest of the site, that menu is always open. Also, there's no footer within the collection section. So this is, again, just kind of catering to the users who are already staying in the collection section. We've brought a lot more presence to the object imagery, as I'm sure you saw with Gray's image before. Before it was just a tiny little, I think it was about 400 by 400 image in the top left corner. Now it's very centric on the page. We added over here in the toolbar, there's now zoom functionality, a full page viewer. You can hop down immediately to the information about each specific object if you prefer to just immediately access tombstone information. And then there's also a download feature now, which thanks to Anne for that, for all of the images in our collection in the public domain. We've also added just more emphasis of the thumbnail images. Much like Gray said, some of the syncs and our image stuff wasn't really cleaned up, and now it is, thanks to Tasha. And now you can just explore things. We've added a carousel here, and this is an object, let's see, the Magbo helmet mask with a ton of imagery, and it's really, really interesting to see all different angles of it. We've also brought more emphasis to the rights and reproductions information. That way, if a user does want to download an image, they can immediately find out. And then we've also added greater emphasis to the object status, so whether or not it's on view. And our hope here is to incorporate more mapping functionality and maybe to integrate some wayfinding here so that we can better promote the collection pages on site at the IMA. Next, for this object, there is a ton of information unique to the IMA that has been produced surrounding this object. And so we've brought a greater emphasis, bringing up the gallery label and provenance information and related text, where now on our collection pages, the object information and the tombstone is the first thing that you see right next to the object. So we wanted to kind of emphasize all the hard work that's being done on content at the IMA. We wanted to also feature the related media here. So we have a lot of video content, which for a lot of people that gives greater context than any sort of text ever would. And overall, we hope to expand this section more and with the content that's being created at the IMA, both from, for example, conservation and archives, and really the goal was to have a design that could grow. So here's an example of the object information section, which is basically just the tombstone. We've added the addition of colors here, and these all link back to search, which is great, really fun. And it also, for sure, will give you a search with objects with images. And then we'll eventually be linking all of these fields again to make everything more browsable and searchable. And at the bottom, we've added a much larger you may also like. Before, I think there was maybe 10 pixel by 10 pixel little thumbnails in the bottom that said more like this. And Curatorial wasn't a big fan of the fact that we were inferring that there was some sort of relationship there. And so now we've changed the title here to You May Also Like, not necessarily suggesting that there is an art historical relationship, but rather encouraging exploration throughout the collection section. Let's see. So that's pretty much it. We were thinking we could do maybe a short little demo now of how this search section works. So, I'm sorry. Oh, here, I already have it pulled up over here. This is really slow. Yeah, I guess so. Oh, really? Maybe I'll... Oh, here. We just needed to reload my Wi-Fi. Okay, so this is the search interface once you've come in. As you see, we've had 51,000 objects. So say I were to search for a rug. Oop. Man. So just really letting people explore here. And then you could come down and say you wanted to search by this color. There's facets over here. You could remove that color. Yeah, it's great. I know I've already discovered a lot of objects that I had never seen or had no idea they were in our collection, so definitely feels more browsable. I think that's it. Any questions for Gray or myself? Thank you. Thank you.
I'd just like to make the point real quick that I forgot to mention this, but since the whole thing is stackly generated, we can package it all up and say that our whole collection is in the zip file of a couple hundred meg, and then we can use that as a data source as well.
And you also get persistent URLs.
Yes, all the URLs are persistent because they are by definition static and permanent.
It's a great benefit.
Are there any more questions for him? So I'm going to start off by saying that I'm kind of jealous of their site. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm also going to say I do work at a library and I have 0 library training. So if you're going to ask me a library thing, I'm probably not going to know the answer. I've just worked there for a while. So all my contact information, hashtag, Twitter, if you want to keep asking me about this, if you have questions I don't know the answer to, feel free. I want to talk to you about what happened in Florida. Not crazy political things that happened, although they relate. The Panama Canal, we all know, reverted back to Panama in '99. There was a large group of Zonians, that is how they call themselves, that is how they refer to themselves. Also, I'm going to ask, are there any Zonian or Zonian descendants in the room? No. Shocking. I find them everywhere I go. They're an interesting cultural phenomenon to me. They are people who were raised to be American in every sense of the word, and in fact, probably hyper-proud American in a very good way. Yet, the majority have never lived a day of their life in the United States. They had lived, born and raised in the Panama Canal Zone. And this made for sort of a weird dichotomy in their lives. They weren't sure where they fit in. When the zone was going to revert back, they were given a choice. You live in Panama, and you become a Panamanian citizen. You lose any rights you ever had as an American citizen, or you move to the United States. Pick a home, we'll move you there. The vast majority picked a home, moved there. They moved to Florida. Some had been there on vacation. The climate is similar. There was also something called the Panama Canal Society. The society had been formed in the 30s, I believe, as a way to maintain those relationships that had formed over time. And they had this cute annual reunion outside of Tampa where they got together, drank copious amounts of rum, and danced till the early hours. Sounds a lot like MCN, except they were older. So they did that. They moved. Before they moved, they decided, hey, you know what? We're really special. What we lived for these past 100 years, not necessarily them for the 100 years, but what their families had experienced for the 100 years, merits saving. So they saved it. They took everything, literally. They took hotel furnitures from the front porch of the Tivoli Hotel. They took the records from the schools. They took street signs. They took everything that the US government was not taking. They took. They were allotted tonnage, just like military is, to move. Military packed it up into boxes, put them on ships, brought it to the US for them. So they had all these things. What do they do with all these things? They decide, hey, we should form a museum. None of us know anything about a museum, but it sounds like a good idea. Other people will care. So, in 1998, they established a foundation. And the basis of that foundation was all of those things they had brought back with them. 2001, they decide, of course, everyone cares about our story. We're going to open as a museum in a rented office space in a strip mall, Seminole, Florida. Seminole, Florida is somewhere between Tampa and Orlando, to give you a general idea. Also, to give you a general idea, I am born and raised in Florida, and I had no idea where Seminole was. So it's that kind of place. It was a very niche thing. In 2002, they changed their name. But all in all, they were this volunteer, retired corps that wanted to preserve their legacy. Like so many collections at so many places, it starts with someone wants to save what they have. So, as you know, Florida, the economy, tourism, we all took a hit. They took a hit as well, and the fact that they were volunteer run, throughout the years they off and on had a paid director who happened to be one of them. It was never really anyone with any museum cultural organization experience. Some had been administrators in the zone, they had political experience. They honestly had no idea what they were doing, and they were just trying to do the best they can. So the University of Florida, which is about 3 hours north of them, someone in the Center for Latin American Studies got wind that this museum existed, that they were in trouble, and that no one knew what was going to happen. The Center for Latin American Studies on campus is one of the oldest and most prominently known centers at a university for Latin America. And as it happens, their development officer went down, met with them, and started a relationship. Started talking to them about how wonderful the University of Florida was. And some of them happened to be alumni, which was fortuitous for us. The center, their job is to teach students. Their job isn't to take a collection, but they had an interest in that collection. So they came to the library. They tried going to the art museum as well, by the way. And the library thought, we have an excellent Latin American collection. We'll talk to them. So this started these conversations. And as you can see, the conversations sometimes became very long, very drawn out, sometimes very quick. We all could agree on some points. I'm also going to say I did work at the library at this point, but I had nothing to do with this then. But a preliminary agreement was signed, and a key part of that agreement and why that collection came to UF was we said we'd take all of it, and I do mean all of it. Other places were interested in parts of it, the photographs. They had large, I'd say about 75% of the collection was government photographs, the official press government photographs that were taken during the construction. Some originals, some reproductions, there was a lot of them. We said we'd take it all. Your grade school report card, we'll take it. Your swim patch from the Red Cross, we'll take that too. Your mom's cookbook, yep, bring it on. A canoe. Well, now we're going to talk about it, but the canoe did end up going back to the donor, but that is one of the only items that did not come to the university. We have boxes of rocks. We have concrete core samples. We have just about everything you can think of that is not the official government stuff that went to the National Archives. We have the people's story. So in 2012, the museum officially closed. You can see this was 3 years after we'd started talking about it. We had some ideas what we were going to do. Not really. So 2012, the museum actually officially closed in July. Starting back in, I believe it was March, we started receiving batches of these items. As you can see there were 15,000 items, supposedly. There were 15,000 records. Each record could have been one photograph. It could have been that box of rocks. It could have been a photo album. It could have been a box of 6 slide carousels. So all we knew were there were 15,000 records. The museum had managed to purchase Past Perfect. They had put records in for each item. Like I said, they were volunteers, they're record keeping. They did a good job trying. But donor information. Oh, this came from Joe. Joe who? Oh, you know Joe who lives up the street, who's Mary's cousin? Okay, not sure who that is, but great. The next record also says it's from Joe. No, not that Joe. You know the other Joe. Do you guys use last names? Sometimes, okay. Sometimes they use maiden names, sometimes not. Consistency was a problem. They developed their own system of accession numbers we had to crack as well. It was great. The library saw that. Keep in mind, I'm still not involved. This is at an administrative level right now. The library saw that. They went to IT. IT said, we're a library. That's a museum. That's a museum software. We're not going to support it. We have no intention of trying. We're going to strip all that data out. So they did, and they asked the one librarian who was going to have to talk about it. And that one librarian was a very traditional librarian who had been in the library 20 some odd years, and he said, can't you just make me an Excel spreadsheet? And they said, well, we can make you an Access database. And he heard database and he thought, that's great. This will be phenomenal. So that's what they did. October of that year, we wrote and successfully secured a 3-year, $500,000 IMLS grant to document the process. What happens to a museum when it comes to an academic library? What happens to that community who so valiantly fought to keep their history? How do they understand what a research collection is? That's where we're at year 3 right now, by the way. So I mentioned this thing started coming. There was that one librarian, but we also thought, hey, we'll put the library conservator in charge of it because all this stuff needs to be looked at. Let's make sure we're not bringing a bunch of bugs into our collection. They were not stored climate control before they came to us either, necessarily. Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. So they got put in temporary storage as the conservator went through boxes and boxes and boxes in between all his other jobs. Our conservator, we're a library, is a paper conservator. I also want you guys to keep something in mind. We're an academic library, and when I say the word museum, people's eyes glaze over, or they turn around and run and tell me we're not a museum. I don't want to hear about how it's done. So when this collection came, overall, the librarians, they were adamant that this was a terrible, terrible idea. No one wanted to touch it. No one wanted to do with it. We will do the bare minimum so the deans are happy. That was sort of the overarching premise, because it was uncomfortable, because it had items that the library doesn't have as many of. It had things that weren't paper. It had artifacts. It had pre-Columbian specimens. It had all this other stuff. It had living donors that make us a little queasy sometimes because we know what they want, and they want to preserve their side of the story and only that side. So it was a questionable time, and a lot of people had to come to sort of grips with this collection isn't all that different from any other special collection we have. But we all agreed that the stuff needed to be saved. So priority number one, stabilize the most fragile objects, get them rehoused, get them into climate control. That was not my priority. I was still not on board. But I said we got the grant. The grant allowed us to hire a volunteer coordinator, because part of the idea was, how do we integrate this? How do we rehouse all of this? How do we update all these records? I know, we'll get volunteers. We're a university. The museum was a volunteer organization. People will be knocking down our doors to come help us. No, they're not. But we hired a fabulous person who is our volunteer coordinator who actually had museum experience. That was sort of our pie-in-the-sky dream, would be we'd get someone like that, and she is phenomenal. She created all sorts of programs and trainings and jobs of what we needed for volunteers to do. The former volunteers of the museum, they did not want to come volunteer. That meant they had to drive from their homes to Gainesville. And her idea of volunteering is an extended program, not just you drop in for 3 hours, you come and hang out, but I'm going to train you so that we can move past these things. So we had to retool our volunteer program to tap our most valuable resource on campus, 48,000 undergraduate students. And those did come knocking down our doors, and they are phenomenal. So we now have anywhere from 10 to 20 undergrads who volunteer for us a semester doing everything. We've trained them on object handling, on rehousing, on every description, metadata, all of it. And that's where this part comes in. But we still had that access database. And I don't know about you guys, that's when I got involved. Because part of the grant was we were going to do a series of exhibitions across campus. And when I started planning for those exhibitions and I started looking, and I said, but that's all I have. I have this access thing with very sparse data. And I started asking IT, did you guys lose any information? So, of course not. Okay. I know there were some images attached. Where'd those go? We don't know. Okay. What can you guys do for me? Because now I have 20 volunteers processing a collection. I have to mount 10 exhibitions across campus in 2 years. What can we do? So my head of web programming at the time, who was a friend, says, well, you know, we have our digital library that we power all of our online collections. I can just make you a subset of it, and you can make that your database. And I thought about it for about an hour, and I said, well, that would be great, because there's no learning curve, and it's web-based, And all my volunteers, I can train them to do that in a few hours and not have to worry about fighting with administration to get Past Perfect or to get TMS or to get anything else that we were thinking about getting. And that web base, that low entry curve, phenomenal. So he did make it internal, supposedly, only, but if I give you that address there at the bottom, you can easily go see it. As you can see on the screenshot, though, some of them it does say access restricted. Those are the ones we haven't updated yet. I don't know if you can see there, but we're up to about 16,000 records now. We have still taken more donations, but we've also teased out some of those records that were for multiple items as well. So UFDC is the University of Florida Digital Collections. It's what we already had. Digital Library of the Caribbean is part of that. PCMI became another part of UFDC. PCMI is the Panama Canal Museum Inventory. We're really creative with our names, I know. But it allowed not only that really low entry point, it allowed really seamless addition of any images. We have a very large digitization lab as part of the libraries. We could easily take any one of those items in that database, get it digitized, automatically add it. We need video, we can automatically add it. It's not pretty and sexy like IMA's is, but it works. It also makes people feel comfortable because it looks like the library. And that meant a lot to the librarians. It was something they could already understand. It was something they could talk to faculty on campus about because they felt comfortable with it. And that was really step one. We can't take this collection if our own faculty and staff don't want to talk about it. They have to like it, they have to love it, they have to champion it like they do all the other collections. Also, PCMI gets automatically integrated with our library catalog. Students searching for a book on Panama, any one of those that doesn't say access restricted already has an entry in our library catalog. So it becomes another resource for researchers. And it was, again, really easy to use. So that's what the public side looks like. The image, you can see the image. It has zoomable. I keep being promised less buttons, sleeker interface. Still waiting. And then the other side is what the description, what that record looks like to the public as well. Some of our records are more sparse, some are a bit more detailed, but they are all in there. We standardized accession numbers as well. That made me happy. I should also say, you can see textiles were also in the collection. There's about 1,500 of these Kuna Indian molas. Also made the libraries very uneasy. How do we store 1,500 textiles? We don't know anything about them. We don't know who made them. Some of them were sold for tourism. Some were commissioned. We don't know about them. Librarians don't like not knowing things. I don't know if you guys know that. It makes them very angry. They have to know everything all the time. They don't like unanswered questions. So this is what it looks like when any one of the volunteers goes in and changes something. Simple boxes, plus marks. They can add more data. They can take more away. It's all there for them. We've told them which fields they have to fill out, which they need to fill out, which ones they can skip if they don't have that information. Our volunteers are a lot better about not knowing things. Maybe because they're students. They already think they don't know things. And we've tried to standardize things like those subject keywords. Again, library, very big on controlled vocabulary. So we found some controlled vocabulary that would make everyone happy. And this is what it looks like if you were to go to it. Pretty standard search box. There's some sub-collections that have been made just for ease of control and ease of finding everything. And there's some browsers that I'm being promised that are in development. So I wanted to show you that so you can see some of the differences on how the names were entered before they came to us. I don't know if you guys can tell, but there's things like the William and Diane Campbell collection is the William and Diane Campbell collection, and just William and Diane Campbell. Some of the William E. LeBrun collection, LeBrun is together, LeBrun is separate. Some have Will, some have William. But I like that I can just go in, search all my donors, go back. Many of them are still living. Some call me up and say, hey, a long time ago I gave the museum this. I want to see it. I'm coming by Gainesville tomorrow. And I say, okay, we'll try to find it. And usually we find it. Sometimes they tell me, I gave them a photograph of what? Oh, it was a photo that my mother used to have. It's not helpful. So what does this database need? What doesn't it give me? It doesn't really give me a space for provenance. I mean, I can add all the note fields I want, but things that I want exhibition history. I need to be able to see all the related items. I need to hide individual specific fields that the public doesn't need to see. The public doesn't need to see what it was appraised at, what that value is. It doesn't need to see exactly which shelf in storage is it stored on, because some of those shelves are secure, some are a bit more open. So I don't need them knowing where that precious album is, because it is not a circulating collection. It is a special research collection. You do have to come to the research room, request it, and then you can look through it, touch it all you want under the watchful eyes of special collections. So right now, starting year 3 of the grant, I'm at the big question. Do I keep this database or do I migrate it again? And I don't really know what the answer is, and each day I come up with a different one, and it all depends on where do we want this collection to go in the next 20 years. So if any of you have any ideas, I welcome them. And thank you. Questions? Yes, sir. Oh,
well, not exactly a question, but
Eric's going to yell at you about the microphone.
We're also citizen scientists, unaffiliated on everything. And one of the things that we're proposing for next year is, rather than have a hackathon, to have a scanathon for the workshop day. And then have a track for citizen science projects to learn exactly the kind of things that you're talking about, so that when passion-driven projects get started, that they have an inboarding, easier time of donating those things to institutions for long-term preservation. So I do want to talk to you about that.
So we are very lucky that we have that in-house digitization staff. That's actually where I used to work before I was exhibits coordinator. I used to manage that. And we do a lot of training. I said we're the technical lead for the Digital Library of the Caribbean, which is a loose organization of cultural institutions across the Caribbean. We usually go in, train them how to digitize their own stuff, and host it up.
I've already talked with Google and cultural folks about getting equipment here and everything. So
happy to talk to you later. Anyone else? No? No one want to take 15,000 items? No. I won't give them up now. Now I've fallen in love with them too. This is actually one of my favorites, because if you look at the guy in the middle, he kind of looks like Woody Harrelson.
Well, first of all, I wanted to just congratulate you on sharing your epic journey, because we kind of need more of these once in a while, so it's really great. Just a really practical question. When you ended up getting the Access database and you were missing all the data, how did you reconnect it when you moved over to the web? Because it seemed like all of a sudden that problem was solved.
It wasn't all reconnected. I honestly don't know if we did connect all of it or not. No one can tell me truthfully, what did we lose? Did we even lose anything? And are things right or wrong? We had to just sort of say, okay, we can't worry about it anymore. We have to just keep moving forward, and we'll try to fix as much as we can. And so each of the volunteers have their own job. One of them has the job of just record cleanup, and he goes through, standardizes names, And through that, we've been able to kind of match up some things, some items that didn't have the donor name before but are referenced in a different record. So he's been able to do that on some of them. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you guys.
There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Ann Young. As they mentioned earlier, I'm at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. I'm joined today with John and Deb. They're going to kind of help by helping to field any questions that you guys have. So we're here to announce the upcoming publication, Rights and Reproductions, the Handbook for Cultural Institutions. This is going to be a new publication that will be co-published by the Indianapolis Museum of Art and American Alliance of Museums. I'm thrilled to be able to have the support of both institutions in this project that has been a couple years in the making at this point. We are very generously supported by IMLS and by the Getty Foundation for the creation of this new publication. So I'm going to take a minute, talk a little bit about where we've come from. So really the genesis for this publication goes back to 2004, when 10 years ago there was discussion within AM, within the RARIN group, which is the Rights and Reproductions Information Network, that a handbook was needed, or some sort of a resource, a guide. In 2006, that idea was abandoned, going, it's going to be print, it's going to be out of date as soon as it's printed. So a wiki was attempted. 2008, that wiki was launched. Unfortunately, we then spent a lot of time in moderating the wiki of taking off a lot of really bad spam and people removing content that was actually quite vital content from it. There was a lot of pornography that ended up getting put on there. We had one particularly horrible day where I went to check the site and the entire thing had been deleted. And God bless Kyle and the IMA Labs team for being able to recover it. I don't know where they got it back from. But that, in essence, led to we completely locked the entire site down, which negates the point of a wiki that anybody can edit it and update it. So in a very off-the-cuff conversation with the IMA's former director, Max Anderson, having a conversation one day talking about the wiki and the future of this and what we needed to do, and he very off-the-cuff goes, well, you should just write a book. And here I am a couple years later. So 2012, we pitched the idea. Everybody kind of went, oh, yeah, we kind of need that. So we applied for the IMLS grant in January 2013, and we were lucky enough to receive that grant last September. So now, as a result of this, we're moving forward. This will now be a digital publication. We're going to build this, hopefully, to be the definitive rights and reproductions resource. We'll have guidelines, established practices, standards, really being able to walk people through the steps of if you're all of a sudden handed rights and reproductions or you're having to build a department, how do you do these things? How do you go about doing copyright research for works in your collection? How do you process licensing agreements? How do you process an external request? Because that has changed greatly from the days of you process your transparency and you mail it out and you have it returned and now everything's digital, and what does that mean? We're also broadly writing this handbook to not just be for museum professionals, but also libraries, archives, and historical societies. So really kind of running the gambit here. So, and several of them are in the audience aside from John and Deb, but we have a wonderful list of contributors who I have lovingly conned into working on this project with me. It's museum professionals, rights and reproduction specialists, intellectual property lawyers, individuals working at libraries as well, that we brought together to work on authoring the content for this publication. In addition to the list of contributors, we have a rather robust legal review panel that's going to be providing peer editing on all of the chapters. Some of you will probably recognize some names on here, working on College Art Association's projects on fair use of images, and some overlaps. So we've been very fortunate to get all of them to agree to work on this project as well. So we're going to be building the digital publication utilizing the OSCE toolkit, which if any of you have been around here for the whole week, you've been hearing a lot from IMA Labs team and others about the OSCE toolkit. So people look at us, and I've had a lot of conversations, and they go, so it's OSCE, so it's going to be an online catalog? I'm like, no, it's not OSCE, it's using the toolkit though, and that there's a difference between these two things. So utilizing the toolkit though, it has the advantage that compared to a print publication with this type of legal information in it that's going to be out of date as soon as it's printed, that we're going to be able to update this on an annual basis. We're going to be able to have reference links within the publication that go back to sites instead of people having to dig around and try to find these later. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of using OSCE. And really, truly, OSCE has been very, very simple to use with the toolkit. Full disclosure, this is not a paid advertisement on behalf of IMA Labs. I am so not the tech person at the table. Rita and Gray can attest to this. Some of the things that I've asked them to explain in this that have had the two of them almost falling out of their chairs, like, really? You don't know what a block quote is? Sorry, out of my depth on this one, but I can explain copyright to you, so, you know. But I digress. So, at its core, using the OSCE toolkit is about building the constituent pieces. So you build your publication, your various sections or chapters, you build your image assets, and then you're just linking them all together, and you can shuffle them around like a deck of cards, essentially. So you build your overall publication that you're then able to link your various sections to, giving basic introductory identifying text to what the publication is going to be, and building the sections. And when I talk about easy, it really has been. Most of adding the content for the chapters to OSCE has been as hard as doing copy and paste from Word. It's been very simple, and I think the most that I've really had to type in have been the administrative title and the title of the chapter, and making sure that I don't type those in wrong. But everything else I have been able to copy and paste from the final copy edited Word documents that we're getting back. Pulling the copy-paste over, one of the things that I absolutely love about the OSCE toolkit is it automatically generates the footnotes that are pulled over from the Word document. So I'm not having to go back in and add those separately. We're not having to figure out did they link correctly. Copy-paste from Word automatically pulls all that formatting in already. About the hardest that we've had has been linking the figures to their various sections, but again, you've already created your image asset, and it's just a matter of linking it there, and then really just assigning it. Is it going to be a plate image? Where is it going to go within the text? And giving it a sense of, when it's rendering these pages, of should this be at the top? Should it be at the bottom? Where should it try to set that in relation to the text around it? So the really exciting part is the online preview is now available. You can find it at rightsrepro.imamuseum.org. It's available online for free. The full publication, which will be an EPUB, will be available next summer. We are hoping for mid to late July that it will be available. It will be exported from the OSCE toolkit as an EPUB and will be available for purchase and download through the AAM bookstore. So I'm just going to go through what a few of these pages look like. I'll let all of you explore it yourselves. I really owe a huge nod of thanks to Gray and Rita for all of their work on this. At the same time, they were trying to do all of the lovely new IMA collection pages. So big shout out to them for all of their help. So we've been able to do this, and really looking at the design for this, trying to create some of the design in the online preview that will carry over into the final EPUB, so that we're not recreating the wheel, as we essentially are creating two different publications right now with the preview and the final. So we quickly worked on selecting the color palette, figuring out kind of this block quote text and how we could do some different callouts for text boxes or case studies within the text, figuring out some of the image placements, the inclusions of, obviously all of the lovely, we're a little logo heavy on the bottom there, but really being able to put all of this information in. So when you go to the preview now, we have a drop down, the full menu, table of contents. All the sections you can click on, but you will notice that there are several that are a bit of a teaser for you that just say coming summer 2015. But that aside, we have included the full introduction to the handbook. Hopefully this will give anyone looking at the preview a real sense of what the full publication is going to be. We also have excerpts from the first chapter on intellectual property. We've got about a quarter of this chapter has been included as excerpts in this, hopefully to provide, again, a sense of the content that we're going to be creating for everyone. Rights and Reproductions Handbook, we couldn't not include the image credits. And then we've included biographies for everyone who is authoring and on the peer review panel for us. Really hoping, again, to give everyone a sense of who we brought to the table to work on this project and bringing together. So price point. I know this is the burning question for all of you. So I've got tons of these bookmarks. Come and get them. Take them back to your institution. Share them with your colleagues. So we're going to have 2 price points for this since we're co-publishing with AAM to follow their model of price points. It will be $4.99 for non-AAM members and $1.99 for AAM members. Hold on to your bookmarks. At the bottom of it, there's a discount code to give you $1 off. So any of you who are also AAM members, I know we're totally breaking the bank that you have to pay 99 cents, so our bad on that. And really, check out the preview and let us know your thoughts on it. Use the hashtag and give us some feedback. Thank you. Any questions?